Let's get some analysis now. Professor Siphamandla Zondi joins me now for more conversation on that. Prof, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. The path, even in '94, to a government of national unity was not an easy one. It was negotiated intensely. There was intense debate within the ANC itself, and the crucial task then was, I suppose, completely different, because then they were trying to reconcile the demand for a majority rule in a unitary state with the concerns of white South Africans over this particular demand. But the ANC then had an overwhelming majority, barring all the challenges that maybe we can talk about. It's a different situation now where the ANC doesn't have an overwhelming majority, and you've got other black parties more than you did have back in 1994. What does that bring into the picture then as far as crafting this path to a government of national unity?
Oh, yes, sir. Good evening, and good evening to your viewers. Yes, indeed. It's different from the experience of 1994. There, a government of national unity was required in order to unite the country. Nobody had any real claim to power generally, and it was all tricky. Anything could collapse. They needed to build confidence in the system, and a government of national unity is usually a great transitional arrangement to move people from one era to another era where there is deep mistrust and deep danger to the transition. We don't have that situation right now. We just have normal hung parliament that you see all over the world. There is no situation you are rescuing. There's no crisis. There is no lack of confidence in the system. There's not even a real threat to the system. What many call the government of national unity, they really simply mean grand coalition, which is the most inclusive form of coalition, which is they get as many parties as possible, not just to pass over the 50 plus 1 point, but as many as possible, bring them in and reduce the amount of divisions and fragmentation in the system, or perhaps also weaken opposition to a coalition by including everybody in. It's a wise move if parties buy into it. You have a grand coalition of many parties, and then you leave one or two parties outside. That's what the DA had in Cape Town. When it first took Cape Town, a big and wobbly coalition can be done, can be managed. It brings all sorts of dynamics, but it isn't really strictly the government of national unity, because there you bring in votes that already been counted, including everybody who is in there. You're not making a special appointment and apportioning position in a special way. I think it's just a grand coalition.
To what extent will this grand coalition be able to navigate that dual role of being a partner to the GNU and being a strong opposition?
It all depends on the basis for the coalition. Parties tend to stick in when they feel that their interests are being secured. Bigger parties have to offer something to smaller parties so that they have an incentive to sit in and feel they are gaining something. But bigger parties must be very consultative and have a very predictable plan that everybody agrees to, so that there is no one who rises up along the way and say they are being undermined. They should all know exactly what is the 5-year plan, what are the priorities, how it is going to do, so that you don't have what you are having in the municipalities, which arises usually because there isn't a properly agreed plan that all that the coalition government does is to implement it. Yeah. And that reduces the amount of tension that should happen among the parties. Of course, parties can always generate tensions from personalities now, or from trying to position themselves for 2026 local government election. Once they calculate that being in this coalition, they are being absorbed and they disappear under the arm of big parties, because big parties tend to want to approach a coalition with a view to absorb rather than to coexist with smaller parties.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if for example, for a moment, let's leave the DA conversation aside. Let's just say the ANC goes with the coalition of EFF, IFP, and PA. Leave MK aside as well. They're able to get 224 seats. I suppose it's a comfortable enough majority for them to run. But you have a situation where the EFF does not really see itself as a small party. Neither does the IFP. Maybe PA might want to compromise here and there. And if EFF is going to insist on the change of the ANC's economic policies, how's that going to work?
I think we should remember that the big parties want to secure their right to govern and lead a government. These parties that are from party number 2 to party number 3, all the way down to about party number 8, those that have crossed the 100,000 mark, want to feel that they are given something substantive that they can use also for the next election. It seems to me that if you are wise enough that you give everybody a serious duty, which is also a potential benefit for them, then you could achieve two purposes at the same time. Could have a government that of people who want to work in all their portfolios, but a government that can stabilize because everybody feels they can use the power of incumbency in order to campaign better for the local government election in 2026, because that's pretty much in their eyes that whatever they get involved in now, it is part of the campaign for 2026, because they're not going to come. Clever parties don't campaign when an election date has been announced, but they campaign when they get a position of power very early on in a term. And that is why all governing parties do not usually lose because they are beaten by others. They lose because they failed to remember the advantage of incumbency. Now, when you are in a coalition, then you get to get a piece of this incumbency, which then you can use to show that you are able to govern, you are able to run a particular portfolio that is given to you, be it Ministry of Water or something, and you use it to gain the mileage and stay in the spotlight and demonstrate your ability to govern. But when parties feel that they are shunted by the wayside, they're not given the role that they are given, they may stay in the coalition for a while, and then when they realize that it isn't quite working for them, then you cause the reactions we've seen in local government. Because we must remember, in local government collapses, they've had to do with faults in the manner in which the coalition itself is designed. It is not automatic. It is just how they design it in a manner that could keep every party in and satisfied and feel they are getting something out of it.
What we have seen as you speak about local government is something similar, I suppose, to what we have seen from 1994 to 1996, where the national party said, okay, we'll come into this government of national unity. But 2 years down the line, then they realized that the ANC is just in a mode of majority rule. They are not consulting them. They appoint finance ministers and just merely inform the clerk and say, this is who we've appointed. And they said, you know what, let's just pull out of this and just go and be in opposition. It's the kind of situation that we see in our local governments where the ANC, because of being so used to being in power, they want to continue to be the ones who call the shots and control things. How is that going to work at a national level where you now have got to share this power in real terms?
Remember that it has worked in South Africa before twice. When the DA took Cape Town with a big coalition, it was able to act wisely at a point and not try to elbow every party out, but show that it can lead a group of parties because it's a leading party in a coalition. It still gets a lot more mileage out of the performance of that coalition than other members of the party. But it's a win-win because all the other parties also gained traction from participating in that. And they achieved the purpose, which was to keep the ANC out of Cape Town. The second one is the coalition that took place in KwaZulu-Natal between the IFP and the ANC. Though the IFP was the leading party in there, it was able to give the ANC significant portfolios, and it was the ANC leaders like Siphamandla, like Hadebe, like Zweli Mkhize and others, even Jacob Zuma, who would be able to use those portfolios that they were needed. Everybody remembers Siphamandla as an MC of transport, created very visibility. They only had a few portfolios, but they made a huge mileage out of those portfolios, while the IFP also maintained the advantage of being the leader of government. It was a win-win arrangement they had. It worked perfectly for both parties. The IFP continues to grow, and the ANC ended up taking over government. So both grew in the period. The IFP only gets harmed after the coalition, but during the coalition, they cannot grow all of them together. It's possible even now to have a coalition, whoever the parties are, if it is the ANC, DA, or it's the ANC, EFF, and IFP, it's possible to have an arrangement where the ANC continues to act as the leader of that coalition, but the EFF has significant portfolios which it can show. For example, if the ANC has the presidency and then the EFF has the Speaker of Parliament, then they can play that role significantly, one in one organ of state and another in another organ of state, feeding off each other, strengthen political oversight and stuff like that. And in the end, the ANC is able to show government well, and the EFF can show that it can hold government to account well, or whatever the arrangement. But you should have the arrangement where each party has an opportunity to show its ability and showcase its ability to do the job and do it well. Because it seems like South Africans are now looking at who performs well, not who has the best rally or who has the nicest messaging or who has the nicest logo.
Yeah. Let's bring in now MK. Is joint decision-making going to be achieved with an MK that wants the president of the ANC out of the way?
It's all happening. That is why the ANC says its door is open. It will engage the MK. But because remember, that's how negotiations work. They're like we say all the time with wage negotiations. You deliberately say you are asking for 15% and you know that you want to get 7%. You can't start where you are going to settle. You start where you are not going to settle, and the job of the process of negotiation is the one that leads to give and take, and you end up settling somewhere. And I guess it's a negotiating strategy to say we're going for this, and then the ANC has to give something else, and MK has to settle for what it gets, but it should be able to show that it caused the ANC to move from where it was, and then and move to where it is today. For example, if the MK ends up being offered with a deputy presidency, it can show to its supporters that it's now governing at a significant level. It is a leader of government business. Though it didn't get the removal of the president, it will be keeping him in check. It will be just right around him. And that is it. And that's the job of negotiators. It is to push the envelope very high and then settle somewhere midway.
Yeah. So would you say that will settle then the political conversation? Because you've got the government conversation and the power conversation, but the political conversation of I'm fixing the ANC, and that's the leader of the MK and what he says.
Yes, it's a challenge, especially with all the parties, remember. Virtually all the parties from number 2 to number 8 have all made it their determination to unseat the ANC. And in many ways, they've achieved that, to move the ANC from 57% to just about 40% now. It is to unseat the ANC. They have removed it from the position of power. Now the ANC has to negotiate power. So they have achieved that. And I guess they will now shift to see whether they cannot now hold the ANC down by being partners in it, but watch it very carefully, give it no space to sway its power and use the power of incumbency. That is why everybody wants to negotiate the ANC and be in the advantage of incumbency the ANC has been in, so that they can keep it in check. So the ANC knows that everybody is trying to partner with it in order to diminish it and drain it. It knows that it has to think very carefully, not just about who it partners with, but how they would manage the coalition such that they don't die in the coalition or due to the coalition, but they actually claw back in the process. But the voters are given no choice. They cannot avoid coalition or go into opposition and fight from opposition. The challenge for the ANC is that it has not shown ability to be a good opposition. It has not been able to do that very well, but it has shown ability to do well as a junior coalition member, as it happened in KZN. But being an opposition, everywhere it has lost and became an opposition, it has not been able to claw back, because oppositioning is a particular type of politics that you must learn based on research a lot. You must be based on understanding and studying the other side all the time. So it needs a science of politics that is taken very seriously. Otherwise, opposition becomes the death of a party. It never recovers.
Interesting. Speaking of the demands of the ANC, there are some who are saying, well, it really doesn't matter what coalition arrangement or structure this is going to take. If it's the DA Grand Coalition, it's, again, the demands of the ANC. Maybe they can choose to die by python or die by lion. Either way, whatever they choose right now, they must just choose whether they want a quick death or they want a prolonged one. What is your take? If they go the DA way, would that then be the quick death of the ANC because of the revolt that you will see from within?
By the way, if you going to look at this from the perspective of the country's interest and the operations of democracy, all the top 8 parties can form government in whatever format they are, because they know that the people of South Africa have chosen them to potentially run government, whoever of them is. Then parties make calculation about who is the best partner and all that. And I know that in the ANC, there are those who say, if we want stability, then we go with the DA. But those who say, if we want change, we go with the EFF. And then there are those who also say, if we want both stability and change, then we go with both the EFF and the IFP. All these configurations, all of them are legitimate once the parties have negotiated and willingly agreed in any direction. My sense is that none of the configurations are actually bad, because all configurations will mix parties. We will not get a coalition that will have parties that are identical. For that reason, it means it will be built in check and balances, and any good Democrat must know that you need to have a check and balance. For example, if you have the ANC and the EFF will be keeping the ANC in check, and the ANC will be keeping the EFF in check. If it is DA and ANC or DAE and IFP, it will be the same. Whichever configuration, it still will be good for our democracy, because the parties that we have in that top 8 are pretty different. They bring different dynamics and they balance each other nicely. And what would be the next challenge then would be the wisdom of leadership and the ability to manage whatever configuration is there. That would be the biggest test. And I hope that the leaders that these parties have matured enough to know how to manage this relationship and avoid the atrocious situations we see at local government, which sometimes is caused by lack of experience and wisdom in political leadership.
Let's take a little bit inside the ANC now, that NEC meeting tomorrow. Is President Cyril Ramaphosa likely going to be on the firing line?
Yes, we definitely the ANC partisan, and anyone who knows it, from birth actually in 1912, it has inbuilt contradictions. It is a multi-class multi-group, multi-constituency congress. It's a conference. It's not a party in the true sense of the word. It's a gathering, a congress. And for that reason, almost every critical element is negotiated, and a bit of horse trading, a lot of deal making, and that tends to fractionalize the ANC. And the duty of every leadership of the ANC in every epoch is to manage these contradictions and produce some sort of consensus internally out of this. And I guess that is why you had on Monday the meeting of the 7 officials, and then followed by the meeting of the National Working Committee to chart and plot how they will manage these demands, which is why in that same period, you were hearing voices on the sidelines, those against the potential coalition with the DA, and those warning up against the MK, and those warning against the EFF. So there are all of these positions. In the end, the ANC would settle for what would be perhaps most tolerated possibility, but whichever option, there will still be opposition internally. Then becomes the duty of the current leadership of the ANC to manage these ongoing contradictions. They might lead to some resignation. Some people will step out and stuff like that. It happens all the time. Yeah. We should expect it at this point, but it's the duty of their leadership to manage these dynamics. It is just tough for the ANC in the sense that clearly a lot of what the MK party has done has relied on the machinery of the ANC used by people who are in the ANC but campaigning for the MK party on the basis that the leader of the MK party is in the ANC and campaigning for the MK party, and the ANC cannot act on all of these people if it has not acted on the leader of the MK party.
Yeah, that's a big conundrum, I suppose, at this particular point, with the MK party having eaten away at their membership in such a way. The final one is, I suppose, with now the National Working Committee having said we're going government of national unity, it means there is no appetite in the ANC for a minority government where matters are managed on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, there is an option. I'm not quite sure if our laws fully allow it, but there is an option of a minority government where you don't really actually have a coalition, but you have a gentleman's agreement. It says, we as a leading party, or you want to constitute a government, we will vote with you to approve the budget, provided the budget covers these things. Secondly, we will vote with you on this or that legislation that you think you have declared to us is very important to get 50 plus 10 votes for. In return, you will introduce this policy, you will introduce this act or whatever, and in return for the votes we do. We are not marrying you, we are only voting with you on days where 50 plus 10 is required, 50 plus 1 is required. Because 50 plus 1 is not required all the time. For the rest, the biggest part of the business of parliament is parliament, which is French word for talking and engaging and dialoguing. That does not need any percentage conversation that happen. The problem comes when you now have to vote for certain things and you need 50 plus 1. That is possible, very risky, but it is possible. And then we have a minority government, which is a minority parties come together among themselves and exclude the biggest party and form a government. It's possible because all of them have positioned themselves to kind of bring down the ANC. They could pretty much all of them.
They could make 60% easily and leave them out.
A coalition.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have 60%. They can run the government.
Prof, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and your analysis there this evening.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. That's Professor Siphamandla Zondi there.